All right, everybody. Welcome back to our Love Yourself Foundation Makers and Finders collaboration charity event. It is now time for the interview. So I'd like to just introduce Monica, who is the CEO, little founder of Love Yourself Foundation, and Josh Molina, who is the co-founder of Makers and Finders.
Testing. Okay. Hi, everybody. As Mel said, my name is Monica Garcia, and this is going to be a live podcast recording. So this will be also on our podcast streaming platforms after today. But I'm really thankful and so grateful to be here today with Josh Molina, co-founder of Makers and Finders. I actually started coming here the first year that it opened, probably a few months into Makers and Finders, this location being open. And at the time, I was serving as an AmeriCorps volunteer with a nonprofit called Greener Planet. And what I had to do with this job was go to different schools across the valley. And a lot of my schools were down here. And then my office was on the south side of Las Vegas. So I would tell my director, I'm like, can I just, post up at a coffee shop and like work from here? And she was always super cool. And as a result, I was here a lot. And I started getting to know Josh a lot and his other staff. And I just fell in love with the fact that I felt at that time, this is like back in 2015, 2016, I started to see what was happening on the street. I went to LVA, Las Vegas Academy. And, back then, too, like, the downtown area was still, it seemed a little bit forgotten. But again, back in 2015, 2016, I started to see, wow, like, there's businesses popping up here. And honestly, Josh and his co-founder were some of the first to do it. So it's incredible just to see Josh's growth and Makers and Finders' growth. And I'm just so honored to be here today and the full circle of everything. So. Hi, Josh.
Hi, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate it. And Monica, great introduction. Everything that she said is spot on. When we opened in 2014, shortly after, I got to meet Monica and some of her team, and just an instant connection. And here we are, almost 6-7 years later, and sitting on this couch. So I'm very grateful as well, and I'm looking forward to tonight. The podcast.
So, one of the first questions that I always ask people when I'm interviewing them is, what is it that you love about yourself, and how has that quality helped you in your life and in your journey, both professionally and personally?
I think that would be my OCD. I know that's usually represented in a negative way, also positive, but I'm very much, an organizational freak, a neat freak, and I like order, I like structure, and I think that, it's a gift and a curse. It's great for, it helped me launch this business, and it's allowed me to keep growing it, but it's also, something that at times could get in the way and, prevents me from taking steps that I may or may not need, but I think that's probably something that I love and also sometimes don't love so much about myself, depending on the context. But yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that's something that we can all maybe even attest to, right? Is like our superpower can either break us or make us. And it's really learning how to navigate that and maneuver it in a way that is positive. And it sounds like you've been able to get a handle of that. And it's evident in all the work that you're doing.
Most times. There are still a lot of times where I have to try to do some self-talk, some self-pep talks, and really try to work through it. But yeah.
Well, that's great. So now let's go back a little bit in memory lane and talk about how did the concept of Makers and Finders come to be, and any other stepping stones that you had to go and take on to make it a reality.
Yes. So we opened these doors on October 30th of 2014. The lead up to that was very much just, I'm a first generation Colombian American, right? So I was born in New York City. Both my parents are Colombian from, they immigrated in the late 70s, early 80s. So when I moved to Las Vegas, I went from being part of a majority. So the highest concentration of Colombians in America is in New York City, where I'm from, and actually the borough that I grew up, Queens, right? And then I come to Vegas, and it's completely opposite. It's more Central American, Mexican, Salvadorian, et cetera, et cetera. So when we arrived here as a family, just kind of seeing the kind of how underrepresented the Colombian culture, the Colombian cuisine was, South American cuisine was, that was my first kind of mental note of saying, hey, there might be some potential here. And then down the road, I got in the insurance business for a while. I'm a natural salesperson, really. And so I got into the insurance business. I hated it. I can't sit behind a desk for that long. But in that misery, I was kind of starting to really look into the actual potential of having a Latin-inspired cafe. And this was back in 2012, 2013. And if I was doing R&D in other cities like New York, Minnesota, LA, and I was seeing all of these very trendy Latin-inspired cafes. And so that really triggered me to look further and start taking this seriously. It was always a dream too. Like, my parents, they always wanted to open a bakery or a restaurant that specialized in Colombian cuisine. So I think it's something kind of planted, a seed planted early on. But it was really just seeing the market in Las Vegas, comparing it to other markets. Vegas, for the last 3 decades, has been a very quickly growing city, and even now, it's experiencing another wave of people moving here. So, that's when I kind of started to conceptualize this vision for Makers and Finders, and a big part of it was I wanted to have a Latin cafe and have all of these different dishes that were very near and dear to me, but I wanted, like, what I always noticed going to very, authentic places, whatever culture it's from, whatever cuisine, is that it's sometimes, you have to be feeling adventurous and very curious to go. And, the menu is sometimes hard to read. The communication sometimes is a little difficult. So you go once in a while, right? So a big part of it was we wanted something that was easy to navigate, the menu, right? And that the sign up front didn't tell you that this was a Latin restaurant. And so that was a big part of building the vision for Makers. Is we wanted a Latin cafe, but we wanted to, we didn't want to give it away at the door, right? And we wanted a menu that was very repeatable, and that ultimately led to the menu that we have now. And from there, the journey to getting here, which is a whole nother story, I'm sure. Yeah. We'll talk through it tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. Let's touch a little bit on the creation phase, because, as an entrepreneur, right, there can be a lot of self-doubt sometimes and belief that your idea will make an impact or that it'll be well received. So what are some things that you did back then to really help yourself believe in the concept, to not let yourself give up, even before you put it out there for the world to see?
In all honesty, there was a lot of blind optimism because I was also 23, 24, 25. So, I was bullish on anything that I did, and even though I probably didn't know what I was doing half the time. But, some very important parts, and I always refer back, to my mentors, right? I was lucky enough to get a job in an insurance agency and had an owner that was very much interested in molding young men, young women into business-minded people. So when I was 17, I was able to get into business with Eric James, who was my first boss, my first mentor, and I think that was a really important part in my journey, just being introduced to contracts, reading, understanding terms and all of these things that come into play in business. he introduced me at a really young age. I still remember to this day, he threw he had like, you know, a couple vehicles at the time. He threw one of his keys at me. I was 17. He's like, hey, he's like, pull up the truck. I'm taking you somewhere. And this was like 3 weeks into this new job. And I'm like, you know, I was already perplexed. And then we go over and he takes me to a contract signing. And he was lending money, charging interest for it, you know, went over the terms with me. And then I sat in that negotiation and that, you know, when they executed the contract. And, you know, I was very lucky to be privy to that information at such a young age. And it really helped me start understanding business a little bit better. And then just working at an office, like, you know, it helped me profoundly, because paper pushing is like the Achilles heel for restaurants. You can have a great restaurant, but typically at any restaurant that I've ever worked at, the paperwork is a mess. Like, there is no flow for the admin side, and the admin is the backbone. So I was grateful and thankful enough to have a little experience, you know, 6 years in the admins and paper pushing and all that. So, you know, my mentors were very instrumental to getting me to this spot that I'm at. And then higher education, you know, my family, I was first in my immediate family to graduate college. I was able to, you know, go to a charter school in my last 2 years of high school, and I graduated with sophomore credits, and then graduated from UNLV with a psych degree in 2010. And just that structure, that you know, that foundation of deadlines and writing papers and, you know, pursuing the best grade that you can get, and I was grateful enough to work in some research labs. So I had a lot of foundation, I think, coming out of college, coming into my own, learning some of this business stuff from my first mentor. And then I eventually got my first restaurant job when I was 21. Usually, you know, you start restaurants when you're 16 years old and you start young, but I started a little later, and I learned the ropes and, you know, worked at several restaurants in the city. And finally, you know, the combination of learning some of these very important admin skills, and then the restaurant side of things, and that culminated to when I was 25, 26, to be able to open it up. But obviously that didn't happen out of my own doing. It was very much a family effort, a team effort. My brother, who's standing right up there, he, you know, I made the call. I'm like, hey, like, you know, I found the spot, this place that we're sitting in 2013. You know, hey, can you put some money in? I need a little bit of money. And he was able to put make an investment. My mom did it. I had some savings, and we were able to just gather up, you know, $100,000 and started looking for real estate, and landed on this location. Originally, you know, we wanted to be closer to Fremont, but, you know, once I stepped foot into Velveteen, which was the first independent business on this block, I was hooked. I'm like, this is it. Like, this is happening. And, you know, here we are. And, you know, we went through sidewalks getting torn apart, trees being planted. I mean, this thing was a Wild West for a good year and a half. And we made it through, and here we are.
That's amazing. I mean, and you withstand the pandemic too, not to mention, right? So I guess, yeah, let's talk a little bit about that, the challenges, right, of owning a business during this time of COVID, and any lessons learned through this time that you can say that you can even be thankful that may have been what's helped the business be resilient during this time.
COVID, I mean, it's. I was telling you earlier, you know, conversation, like this year has been the hardest year of my life, professionally, personally, emotionally, all the above, right? It's weird because last year didn't, even though, you know, that's when the pandemic began and all, you know, everything was new and unknown. I feel like last year was a breeze compared to this year. And this year we're just feeling, you know, the labor market is restructuring, things are just resetting, and it's been a tremendously difficult year. Back in July, I mean, we had lost so many of our staff, our team. Resorts World opened up, so they grabbed a bunch of our team members, and then things were just shifting. It was so palpable too, like and it still feels that way. It's in the air, right? I think a lot of people feel that way. Like, hey, there's a lot going on in this world right now, and yeah, it's been extremely challenging. But I will say that we did make some really good movements early, right? So when the closure happened, the shutdown happened in March, we gathered, the upper management gathered, and we made a conscious decision. We're like, all right, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna board up our shops? Because, we are in downtown, and there's always been, a pretty dense homeless population. But when that shutdown happened, it was like a whole different scene out here. Like, they were out and about openly, right?
Yeah.
So we had to make a choice. Are we gonna board up the store and get, and do what pretty much everybody else did? Or, are we gonna speak true to our name, which is, that's kind of the branding that we carry. Makers and Finders is very much the spirit of like an entrepreneur, right? The American dream, the hustle, the bustle, the moving, the shaking. So we made a choice early on to not close our doors, and so we took it old school. One of the first things we did in this location before we opened the doors was set up a coffee bar right on the sidewalk there on June of 2014, right? And we were giving out free coffee to the community, and that's exactly what we did March 19th of 2020. We were like, hey, we need to be out here. We need to get on that sidewalk. We need to put our espresso machine out there, and we're going to do this. Yeah. And obviously, it was a really tricky situation to navigate because of the safety of our health and our team members. But, we were able to get our management team to back us. And first couple weeks, Jared could speak to this wherever he is. But, we're like, hey, this was a mistake. What are we doing? Like, we need to be at home. But we felt the duty to serve our community, and we still knew that there were people out there who need their coffee, who need their food. And so, week 3, week 4, as we got into April, like, we started getting groups of people riding their bikes, people coming, pulling up, ordering food, popping the trunk in their car and just eating out of their car. And then next thing you know, we're like hitting like 50% of our normal sales on the sidewalk.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so I would say that that's probably one of the best things we did.
Yeah.
Is kind of stay true to our brand and our name, and put ourselves out there. But that's on the flip side, that was also kind of why this year's been so difficult, was because we were very bullish last year in staying open, reopening, and getting going. And so I kind of burned myself out a little bit. And then this year, I wasn't expecting this to happen, this labor shortage and this whole shift in the labor market. And so, that same spirit got me into trouble this year. And, I got a little overzealous. In April, we tried to roll out a whole new menu and added a bunch of different items, and it was the biggest flop of my professional career. And I've never openly said that, but I've done a lot of self-reflecting and just realized that, hey, it's a gift and a curse, right? And it bit me in the butt pretty hard. But thankfully, we're resilient, we're strong, we were able to survive, but, we're wearing the scars,
Yeah. Well, thanks for opening up, because I think, especially as business leaders or just leaders in the community, a lot of times people just see the good things, right? And might paint a false image of reality. And there is a lot of failure that comes into doing what you love. And I think it should be celebrated more. And the idea that you grow from it and you learn from those challenges. So can you touch a little bit about that? Just what do you do, right, to help yourself through those moments of what you might perceive of, oh, it didn't work out, but I have to keep going. So what helps you to keep going?
That's a really good question. um, so, I mean, I'm thankful because, I have great family unit. I have a 4-year-old son who, I'm his superhero. So I have family who believe in me, who have never given up on me, even though they've had so many opportunities to do it. So I find a lot of my strength in family. My parents, they're both, they came with nothing. My father, he worked, his minimum wage was $2.50 working at a factory in New York City. He got here on a jet plane on a hidden runway in the Bahamas, and then from the Bahamas to Miami. I mean, the very, very interesting roots, right? And so I just really, I try to reflect on that a lot. I'm like, well, I'm not moving into a new country, not knowing the language, and blindly just taking a huge leap of faith and starting a new life, right? That's much harder than anything I have to complain about at the moment, even COVID and everything else, right? So I draw a lot of my strength from there, but that gas tank has been pretty depleted this year. So I've had to really kind of focus on me, on really trying to understand myself a little better, because I thought I knew myself. And then once I was so weakened this year by the flop in April and being burnt out by just never taking a break through COVID, I was very vulnerable mentally, and I had some really tough, dark moments where I'm like, man, I'm just gonna close shop. What am I doing? Like, this isn't a life. Like, I'm not happy. And so ultimately, I know I don't want to oversimplify it because everybody's different. Everybody takes life and their world differently. But to me, it just came down to, hey, like, I felt like I feel like this, but I've packed it in early. I've gotten a good night's rest, and sometimes the next day I don't feel the same way. And that's the human imperfection, right? Like, we take the moment so seriously, and sometimes we don't realize that, hey, I just need to go take a freaking nap. I just need to go sleep. Yeah. And I wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel a little different, but not all the times.
Right.
But it's that I clinged on to this year. It's like I was having 5 bad days, all to get to that one good day. Yeah. And that one good day gave me enough energy to fight through the next 5 bad ones. Right. And I was kind of in that loop for a few months, and it built up my tolerance. And now, I'm feeling reinvigorated, and now I'm like incorporating my gym back into the routine, the physical health. I was in group therapy for a while too, so I did that, and that was really helpful. And now I'm trying to get myself back into it. So, it's a combination. It's never one thing. What works for you at that moment to get you out of that hole won't work for you the next day when you're in this hole. Yeah. So you have to understand that there's not one formula to be happy or to avoid sadness or depression, right? It's what I call these are the waves. Mm-hmm. You just have to learn how to ride them, whether they're up or they're down.
Absolutely. Life is a spectrum, right? And it'll test us in different ways, and it's how we get through those stormy waters that really helps us to build that strength to keep going. So I think I'd love to know, like, what are some things that bring you joy, Josh, that and I'm not just saying this because we're at Makers, but what brings me a lot of joy is going to coffee shops. I love just doing that. If I can do that every day, I'm so happy. But yeah, what are some things that bring you some joy that you're like, you know what, maybe all these things over here aren't working out exactly how I would like them to, but at least I have all this, and this.
Yeah. My my original joy for opening a restaurant was I legitimately putting a smile on somebody's face and giving someone an experience and having them taste something that they maybe haven't tasted, or a different expression of a flavor that we have here, and just seeing that face and seeing that reaction to the space as well, because a big part of this place wasn't just the Latin cafe, the food, it was also the space. We wanted to create something very unique, very different, something that you're like, well, I've seen this in my city, I've seen this where I come from, and we wanted to have a really a space that really fit a lot of people's likes, right? So for me, that brings me a lot of joy, and to this day it does. And that's why if I'm here, which I know my team would rather me not be here as much, because I am hands-on. I want to go and I see a dirty plate, I want to go pick up their plate right there. I mean, I want to go, bust some dishes, and I want to make sure people are enjoying themselves, and that brings. I mean, that was my original joy for doing this. It's just there's nothing like seeing someone happy because I had this interaction with them and I guided them through this food and beverage experience, and they walked out of here happy. And that to me was my original joy, and it still is. It still is. I enjoy it, and what's cool is that it still feels novel. It hasn't worn yet, but that's something that I really hold near and dear. And then obviously my son, my 4-year-old, Hudson, he's a huge part of why I, keep going. And, I, yeah, at the end of the day, at least I can speak for myself. I feel like I don't know what I'm doing half the time. Even though I've gained and collected these set of skills, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing, but just the naivety and the pure joy that, this 4-year-old displays is it's kind of helped me reconnect with my childhood spirit,
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And just seeing him imagine, and we're playing with toys and just creating these characters, and that was very much who I was as a child. I was very imaginative. I could sit in a corner and play with these toys and create these stories, and really that, in retrospect, in going through this fatherhood experience, I realized that that's what brought me to Makers. That's what brought me here. It's that imagination. It's that curiosity and that kind of childhood kind of interest in the world. Yeah. These possibilities that, when you're young, when you're a kid, you're I can do anything. And I've really held on to that a lot, and I've really reconnected to that part of my spirit, this year, and it's really helped me, just, hey, I can't even get an email out right now. Let me close this laptop. Let me get my child. Let me go to the park, and let's watch him run, and let's watch him be free. And that to me I was like, this is okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Wow, that's beautiful. I love that. Man, well, Josh, I feel like we've touched upon all the main things, and I let's touch a little bit before we end our conversation on the growth of Makers and Finders, and just how incredible that y'all are in downtown Summerlin, Area 15. You have Take It Easy as well. So if you can just touch upon that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the vision was always, I kind of felt like we're carrying, a culture here, in Las Vegas at least. And, we were always very much hey, this is step one, And, it's always been a goal early on to grow this concept into a multi-store, multi-market concept and business. And so the first step to doing that was downtown Summerlin, which, this is rewind. This is 2017. Downtown Summerlin had just, gone through a a turn, right? Like they sold off to Howard Hughes, the corporation that owns it, and bought all the land around there. They the original ownership, the corporation that owned it had a bunch of these weird food and beverage. So there was like closures of all kinds of businesses. So we came in and, saw this third generation space, right? And it was an opportunity because one of the biggest costs in at least this kind of business, food and beverage, is that initial contribution. You gotta have $200,000 to build a kitchen and build a restaurant, build a dining room, and it costs a lot of money up front. And so the attraction to downtown Summerlin was, again, like, I think I saw what they were doing. I understood, I got to meet some of the leadership of Howard Hughes. I saw their vision. Same thing here. Like, there was a vision here when, of the city of Las Vegas, and it continues to grow. We have the Arc, and now we have that, I don't know, we're all on Facebook. We saw the pedestrian walkway happening as well next year. But the vision in downtown Summerlin, I was like, okay, I see. They were trying to go local. They were trying to reinvent downtown Summerlin. And so we jumped into this third generation space, and something that would have cost us $250,000 to build, we had a kitchen hood, which is, a good chunk of money just to have that part. The grease trap, which is, $30,000. That's hey, I just saved $60,000 by going into this space. And so we were able to do a renovation as opposed to a build out, which cost dramatically less. And, we negotiated a good deal to have some free rent in the beginning just to get us off of our feet. But it was daunting because, once again, it was a third generation spot, which means that I was the third business going into this space. The two before me had failed. But a lot of it is just gut feeling. And I still remember sitting with Omar, my brother, sitting on that patio, and and I'm like, I think we could do this. I think this is gonna work here. And I was telling him about why, and the space is just, I'm kind of weird in the sense, like, there was like some numerical things that were very correlated, like, and I'm kind of weird. And then the shape was a certain way, and I'm like, there's something about this place. And we took the dive, and man, we're going on our 4th year anniversary, December 21st, and
that's amazing.
Crushing it. Yes. Crushing it. And thank you. And then Area 15, or Take It Easy Roasters. That's where, we wanted to build a vertical business. Like, I don't just want to have my retail and have to be, I want to have control of my product and my margins as much as I could. So, again, with Omar, we found this coffee roaster back in 2017, and it was sitting right in that building over there, Soho Lofts, through a failed project. The owner, Sam Cherry, of that building, and he actually just built this lofts over here. He's like, hey, you want to buy this roaster? It's in the box. I'm like, I'll sell it to you for cheap. Let's go see it. And we grabbed it, bought it, sat in our warehouse in Chinatown for a couple of years, and then we opened Take It Easy Roasters. And it's off Spring Mountain and Wynn Road. And now we roast coffee for all of our locations. We have a distribution van, which Adrian used today to move his stuff, and so now we distribute coffee to our locations. It's also a bakery, so our baked goods are made there and distributed. And then the next step, that was last year, so we opened right after the pandemic, July 15th of 2020, and then June 3rd of 2021, we opened a location, or a micro location inside of Area 15, where it's coffee, pastries, and that's also been going really well, thankfully.
It's just amazing, and I'm so grateful to have been able to see the growth over the years. And as a person that grew up in Vegas, and to see this area of the Arts District, what it is now, and I don't even know, the memory, I can't even remember what was here before all of this. So it's just amazing to everything that you and your team have been able to do for the Vegas community, aside from the tourists that come and get an idea of, oh, okay, these are other things that are going down here in Las Vegas. But for the heart of the community, for the people that live here, it means a lot, honestly. So I hope that that on those difficult days, remember how amazing and what this really does mean for people that live here, and hope, I think with time the reputation of Las Vegas is changing. It is becoming more than the Strip, and it's amazing that you're at the forefront of that.
No, I mean, I'm so grateful, and I really appreciate you, Monica. I'm genuinely very happy to be able to participate tonight, and same to you. I've seen your growth and seen all the hoops you've jumped through to be where you are. So I appreciate your words, but I just want to send them right back to you because you're doing something incredible, and please don't stop.
Thank you, Josh. Well, I think that concludes an incredible interview. Thank you so much, Josh. Appreciate you, and I'm so thankful. We've never done a partnership like this with a company, so just thank you so much. So, today starts a week-long fundraiser for LYF, and at both locations, Makers and Finders locations, you can purchase the menu, and $5 comes back to LYF. So, and on December 16th, we'll find out how much was raised at our next event. So, and which will be at the Gather House right next door to Ferguson. So, again, as a growing small nonprofit, everything really does help. Any donation helps. So, just thank you so much, Josh, for making it happen. And it's truly been a pleasure. Mm-hmm.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate